Hi, welcome to Coffee with Kathleen. Look at what I've got. My Women in Auto Care Yeti for my coffee today. Super exciting. Last month for International Women's Day, I did something pretty special and donated a significant amount of money to women in auto care. I think it's especially important as we think about like what's going on in the world and how we feel about it, that we don't just show up as anti the things that we don't like, but we show up as plus signs for the things that we do like and that we do think are doing the right things. And any money donated there really helps other women to get scholarships to be part of the automotive industry. And so I thought that I would use my mug and just put in a little plug for being more involved with women in auto care or other industry associations that you think are meaningful or positive for you. Or look, associations, groups, etc., outside industry as well. Let's not just fight against the things that we want to fight against, which could be pretty important to fight against, bigotry and tyranny and so forth. But let's also fight for the things that we care about inside of our own leadership journeys. And so speaking of, that's what I would love to talk to you about today. We're probably, look, I don't have the exact percentage, but we're over a quarter of a way through the year now. And so, how's it going? Drop me a little note in the chat and let me know how things are feeling for you. For me, things are feeling good. But I also realized the other day that I have an opportunity to do something and that I haven't done in a while. And that is to clarify some of my leadership values and to think about how I'm showing up. And so I'm going to offer you today some really practical ways that you can do this so that you can gain a little more of that clarity and then also have a form or a format to share that with the people that you're working with, both in overt ways as well as the subtle ways. So 2 things that I think are really important to clarify and to look over from time to time and see if they remain the same are your non-negotiables for leadership and your situational leadership values. And so the non-negotiables are things that it doesn't matter what the situation is. These things are just always true. And so I personally am committed to inclusive environments and to making sure that environments that I have honor and respect people. And that is 100% of the time. There isn't a situation where I think it's appropriate to deny somebody the respect around their intrinsic humanity that they deserve. So that's an example for me of a non-negotiable value. And it is one of my top values because I do lead a team and I participate with many different teams at many different times. And so I think that is something that's super important. I also think it's super important that things always be empowering for people. And so I ask a lot of questions and I try to figure out what's really going to be meaningful or powerful for people. But then those answers vary. And so that's where some of the situational leadership comes in. There's a particular way that I deal with one of my leaders where he doesn't enjoy being put on the spot. And so when we are in meeting situations together, and someone says, hey, so, okay, got that, can you quickly run me through exactly how X, Y, or Z works? He does not want to be the person who is on the hook for explaining that unless he's had prep time ahead of the meeting to know that was coming and that he's ready for it. So as his leader and somebody who understands what his processes are, oftentimes for those very spur of the moment kind of things, I'll jump in and I'll give an overview. That gives him a little time to think of some of the details and things that he might want to also share. And then I will invite him into the conversation by saying, is there anything that you would add to or change about what I just said so that we can give a complete picture to the folks who are asking us these questions. And that gives him the time to collect his thoughts and get himself together. So we are very effective partners when it comes to that. I have another leader on my team where if I were to do that, he'd be very unhappy because he wants to lead when someone is asking those questions. And both of these guys know their stuff. And so there's not a reason for me to not let them demonstrate what they know. But there are different approaches in meetings around that, depending on which leader I'm dealing with. That's situational leadership. I don't mind leading the conversation. I also don't mind hanging back and letting someone else lead the conversation if that's what they want to do. And it can be tricky because sometimes when I'm dealing with people and I'm trying to figure out what is it that they really want from me, and what is it that they really want for themselves, sometimes those decisions or those conversations are led by them having in their minds, well, this is my boss, or this is a person who has a particular title in the company. And so I'm going to say what I think they want to hear from a leadership perspective, as opposed to saying what I really think or how I really feel. And so sometimes I really need to dig and to understand people. And one of the great ways of doing that is simply to, after I've had a session with somebody and we've showed up in these ways, like these 2 ways that I just discussed, is to just do a quick check-in, usually within a day or so of having had, and say, so we had that meeting and we were asked about this, and, this is kind of how the meeting went. So I'd love to hear from your perspective what your thoughts are about it, or how we could have more effectively paired in the meeting. And I ask them to come up with any refinements that they can first, right? And I say, let's not focus on, what was positive or great about the meeting. Let's just think about, if we were to refine how we worked together in that meeting from your perspective, what would some refinements look like? And that's where I can start to really dial in, because then sometimes I'm forcing them to come up with things that they would change. And then now that's where we can really get to the meat of the conversation, because then they can say, well, next time I'd really love for it to go like this, or I thought we could do this, slightly differently, or whatever. And that allows me to show up for people situationally while still honoring my top line, always on values. And then, if I am receiving suggestions from my staff where they really feel like things should be handled a different way, and I feel that those suggestions that they're offering are maybe in conflict with my values, it is a great opportunity for me to say, that's actually probably not something you'll ever see me do, because I do feel like that conflicts with one of my values, and here's what that is, and here's why that is. So really having refinement over those conversations, really figuring out how your team would like you to show up for them, and how sometimes showing up for them means leaning back and not leaning in, and allowing the team members themselves to have the front seat, to be in the driver's seat, or be in the front seat in the passenger seat while I'm in the back seat, or I'm not even in the car, maybe, right? Maybe they want, more opportunities to ride solo and bring back the results and so on. And it's really important to understand where I'm needed and not needed, and how people are interpreting that. So I'm constantly checking in, which is not to say that I am perfect about this at all. But I do really understand and have self-awareness around myself. I know that I have a very big personality, and that if I don't really work on showing up in the right ways and exhibiting the right behaviors, that I can very easily, take over. I can very easily crowd some of the air out of the room for people to have suggestions or ideas. So I try to be attentive to that as much as possible. So again, making a list of your non-negotiables and really understanding what those are, understanding what the 3 to 5 most important non-negotiables are, super critical. And then from there, your situational leadership will flow. And then doing those mini follow-ups or postmortems or whatever, and not making a huge deal out of it, but just making it sort of part of your regular practice as you're having those conversations and asking for those tweaks will really help things to move forward. And then I am constantly surprised, delighted, encouraged by the kinds of suggestions that people have for those tweaks. It makes not just me better as a leader, but it actually makes the entire business better. And so we're in a period right now where we're overhauling lots of the ways that we do things, particularly around some of our partner programs and things like that. And I'm so excited because this is largely being driven by ideas, suggestions, and work that's coming entirely from the team as opposed to coming from Kathleen. And so that's really very beautiful. I think the third challenge that we have as leaders, and something that we do need to be attentive to so that we can maximize what's going on for our people, is that we have to be attentive to our own careers. And we are also, in addition to being leaders and sort of community containers, we're also individuals, and we have our own hopes, dreams, desires, thoughts, things that we want to have happen for ourselves. I've always been a fairly ambitious person, and I do have ambition for myself. I am determined that that ambition will never be at the expense of someone else. I try not to buy into, as much as possible, any kind of scarcity mindset where, we're all jockeying for one position or something like that. And so we have to step on each other to get there. I don't think we have to. And if I'm in an environment or a culture where it seems like that's being encouraged, or that's the kind of behavior they're looking for in order for people to reach where they're going, then that's certainly not going to be the right or good environment for me personally. But I do have to manage my career, and managing my career has benefits to my team, because the better able I am to manage my career and to be well respected and well thought of, and to have my ideas and all of that, really listened to, taken seriously, to have influence within my organization, the better able I am to also advocate for my team, to provide air cover to them at times, or to give their ideas a broader reach or more life by carrying them. So leadership is a job of carrying, and it's important that I be able to do that for my team members, and that I be able to champion their successes. And so I think about it as, you've got your leadership structure. Those are people that you either report to or that are more senior than you, that you have a lot of interaction with, and that you need to tend to or manage in a certain way. And people often talk about, managing up and the challenges of that. And then there are my peers, people who are at a similar or same level to myself that I work with, particularly my critical peers, where I'm working with them on an ongoing basis, where those relationships are pretty important. And we've already talked about, either my direct reports or the less senior people in an organization that may work with another leader. So one of my particular values that I think is important is, I think every suggestion we have about how to lead up, which is a subtle dance of leadership where, we're positioning things, we're making business cases for things, we're having very carefully constructed conversations in a particular way that are acknowledging of the person, and that, are very collaborative. All of those things that you might do when you're managing up with your boss are also things that you should do when you're managing sideways with your peers, and things that you should do when you're managing your team members. Why would you be more careful about a conversation with your boss simply because they're your boss, or with your CEO or a more senior person in your organization, than you would be about a conversation with a cherished team member? And I think that's something that gets lost, is when we have profound respect for other people, then we work very hard to have those eminently respectful and very careful conversations, wise speech, as it's called in the meditation world, with others. And so what this means is, a lot of times it's about, in every single layer of these conversations, it's about managing reactivity. And so again, I'm going to give you a very practical suggestion, is that sometimes I feel myself in these conversations getting anxious, or I feel myself starting to get hooked in a particular way that I think is going to be non-productive to the conversation. For me personally, it's usually I can feel a tightness either in my chest and throat area or in my solar plexus. That's for me where it shows up. And then I know if I carried too much of that throughout the day, because I'll end up with shoulder and neck pain. Like for me, it starts from here. And then the more intense it becomes, it radiates upward. And it might be different for you. You might have different bodily signals that are telling you that. So I do regular body check-ins to say, am I holding something, and where am I holding it, and how is this feeling? And so that's one thing that I do throughout the day. And the second thing is that every now and then I need to take a pause to breathe and re-regulate my nervous system. And I need to do this because I've just had a really difficult conversation or a difficult meeting. And so a few deep breaths never hurt anything. And you can sort of take those without necessarily being super obvious. But there is also a more obvious form of breath work that will actually really be even more effective for you in managing and regulating your nervous system so that you can create some space for your reactions. The bad thing is that if you're in the middle of a Zoom meeting, it'll be kind of super obvious that you're doing this. So maybe you'll want to go off camera for a few minutes, or you'll want to do it once the meeting is over, sort of when you're in that space between meetings. And so I'm going to demonstrate it for you now. I'm not afraid to look silly on camera. I think you all know that about me already. So I'm going to look very silly, and it is single nostril breathing. So what you're going to do is you're going to block one nostril. You're going to intake breath for about 15 seconds. You're going to hold that breath for as long as you can without feeling super uncomfortable. That's going to be between 20 and 30 seconds. And then you're going to do a 10 to 15 second exhale. And then you're going to repeat on the other side. And I'm not going to model this part of it for you, but ideally you're going to do this back and forth, probably about 10 times, or about 5 minutes in total duration for the breath length. So let me show you what I mean. You're going to inhale. Exhale. And then you're going to plug the other side and repeat the same. I just did it a little faster because I'm sure you don't want to sit here for 45 whole seconds, but you're going to alternate. And of course, it's kind of obvious that you're doing this when you're doing it, right? And this is something, it's not wooey. This is something that is based or rooted in scientific fact. So when you're inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your nose in your regular breaths throughout the day, your nervous system is actually attempting to make one nostril dominant and then the other nostril dominant in a pattern about 5 minutes apart throughout the day. Sometimes your system is effective at doing that, and other times not. So the reason why switching nostrils really helps is because your left side activates your parasympathetic nervous system, and which is related to relaxation and calm and all of that. And your right side activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is where you get energy and action and enough juice to kind of carry on. And so by you alternating active, inactive, active, inactive, it allows the balance. And you need both of those things, right? You don't want to lie down and take a nap because you're too relaxed. And you don't want to be hyperactive and overly reactive to the people around you. So doing that 5-minute practice will really enable you to then show up how you want to show up, to reground yourself in your values, which I've talked to you about this before. If you've been a long time watcher, listener of this podcast, priming your environment. So having your values someplace where you can see them, and you could even have them in front of you as you're doing this breathing exercise. It allows you to recenter in the values, and then to have your next set of actions come from that place. Or if you're not sure how for your next set of actions to come from that place, of course, I have a number of advisors that I use to help me with all sorts of different things. And I can at least seek advice from that place where now I'm centered and I'm saying, I'm dealing with this problem and here's how I'm kind of tangling with it. Here's where the knot is. Here's where I need help. But I am seeing this side and I'm seeing this side. I'm coming from a place of as much clarity as I can have in this moment and compassion. And I'm looking for a suggestion or advice about how this would be values aligned for me. And then that allows you throughout the day to demonstrate your values, to show up in your actions, language, and the questions that you ask from that place. It is also helpful to periodically do an evaluation. So at the end of last week, which was a hard week for me, I'm going to be honest, it was a tough week. I had some definite bright spots. All my weeks have bright spots, thank goodness, because I work with some amazing people and they just light up the world. And I have those bright spots, but it was also marked by some difficult moments that I don't have every single week. And some of those moments were things I didn't have time to prepare for. I didn't see them coming. So I didn't know that's what I was going to be faced with. And I thought to myself, did I come from a place where I demonstrated my values? And if I didn't, how can I go back to clarify with that person outside that situation to say, hey, we had that difficult or tough interaction. And here's some follow-up that I would like to have come from that so that, I'm operating from a place where we're fully connected and you can see, what I'm all about and what I plan to do about it and how we can best come together. And so I feel like that evaluation of what were my actions, what was my language, what questions did I ask? And by the way, if you're not asking any questions in a difficult scenario and you're not in curiosity, then that's kind of step one of understanding that there's more to unfold about the situation or more to understand about it. And so as soon as you can get into that curious and question asking place, it's going to be helpful. But to do those little self-inventory postmortems and just kind of check in with you. How can you do this with your people? How can you constantly be offering them feedback, input, documenting their performance, doing all the stuff that we as good bosses are trying to do if you don't occasionally self-manage or self-regulate by doing that for yourself? So what techniques have you found that really help you to center your nervous system so that you can be a great leader up, sideways, down, so to speak? And what are your non-negotiables and values? How do your situations flow from there? Have you ever tried a self-evaluation inventory other than the one your boss makes you do when it's time for your annual review, but a real self-evaluation inventory that's just you for you? And what were the results of that? I'm super curious. Would love to have more conversations with my community about that. But for now, it's a cheers from me. Thank you.